Board of Trustees of the Lamar Consolidated Independent School District is called to order at, what's the time? 6:01 p.m. Thank you. This is the special board meeting being held on January the 13th, 2022. We have a quorum with all members present. Ms. Fossick, is there any public comment?
Yes, Madam President. If you wish to address the board, you must fill out a card and submit it before the presiding officer calls the meeting to order. While speakers generally have 5 minutes to address the board, the presiding officer may establish an overall time limit for public comment and adjust the time allotted to each speaker when necessary to accommodate a large number of speakers. However, no speaker shall be given less than 1 minute. All of this is in compliance with House Bill 2840. Each speaker tonight will have 5 minutes. While the board values hearing from members of the public, trustees may not respond to comments as they are prohibited by law from discussing or deciding any subject that is not on the board's publicly noticed agenda. Speakers having complaints against individual district employees or trustees may only address the board after filing a complaint form in the manner provided for in board policy, DGBA for employee complaints, F&G for student and parent complaints, GF for public complaints. The presiding officer or designee shall determine whether a speaker has filed a complaint according to policy. Any speakers who complain of individual district employees or trustees during public comment will be directed by the presiding officer to stop addressing the board and will refer the speaker to the appropriate complaint policy. When you come forward, please state your full name. Our first speaker is David Vershek. Excuse me.
Good evening. Oh, a little loud. My name is David Vershek. I live in Del Webb, Sweetgrass. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you, to the board. My comments are about the Lamar Consolidated Independent School District Master Plan. It probably was a good plan when it was created in 2003, when Lamar was a small, I guess you'd say, urban school district with maybe 17,000 students. I don't think it fits the current situation in Fort Bend County. I've been on the last two bond committees, and I have seen, that's why I first saw the 2003 plan. It has apparently not been, maybe it's been looked at, it was never documented that it had been reviewed and accepted as is through the time that I saw it. I think if you go to the site now, the master plan doesn't have a date on it or any revision signatures or anything like that. So I think that it should be reviewed, and I'm concerned mainly about the planning for high schools. I think that's where the big expensive items are. I think one of the things we all need to pay attention to is something that it's kind of a joke, but the law of unintended consequences. So here's a few unintended consequences that are associated with high schools. First, the cost per student is higher for small schools. I was on the last two bond committees, and I looked at other large and growing school districts in the Houston area and also in farther north in Dallas and places. And I found a significantly higher cost for small schools. I found that the cost of a proposed, at that time, LCISD high school was $120 million. Now, I don't know exactly which one. And it's planned for 2,000 students, which works out to be $60,000 per student. I also found a Cy-Fair ISD high school that had a planned capacity of 3,000, but the cost was also $120 million. So that works out to be $40,000 per student. If you ran that through with the numbers, you could see that it would save multiple millions of dollars if Lamar had that at least evaluated and considered a plan, a plan like that. So I'm not talking about class size. The class should remain the same. With the larger high school, the additional cost is probably more classrooms, obviously, because you're keeping the same class size. Maybe a larger lunchroom or cafeteria or more land for parking. The gym, the basketball court, the swimming pool, other facilities, they don't need to be any bigger. They're all standard size. So that's the number one point. Number two, there's like a multiplier effect on administration and overhead. If you have, we have 6 high schools. If you have 6 of everything, then you have 6 class principals for each level. You maybe have 6 nurses. Maybe you have 6 football coaches, 6 basketball coaches, 6 football coaches. It's almost like a pyramid. Third, the effect of many small schools on district facilities. Lamar has 6 high schools with a planned attendance of 2,000. That's 12,000 students. Each school has a football team. I don't mind schools having football teams, but each school has one. If there were 12,000 students in high schools that were planned for 3,000 students, you would have 4 high schools, which would be 4 football teams. Lamar has 1 football stadium. It appears that 1 football stadium can't handle scheduling for 6 teams, so we now need a 2nd football stadium. The 2020 bond issue, Proposition C, was to build a 2nd football stadium at a cost of $94 million. Prop C was rejected by the voters. I voted against it myself. If we had larger schools, we wouldn't be able to play the football games for 4 schools on one weekend and not have some of the schools playing in the hot afternoon heat. I know it's difficult to plan for growth, but my request is that the board review the master plan and reconsider the size for future schools, particularly high schools. Look at what other growing districts in Texas are doing. Humble is one. There's also one north of Dallas. I think it's Fresno. Identify maybe the best practices and use them to update the master plan. Thank you.
That's all, Madam President.
Okay, thank you. We will begin with item 3A1, the discussion and possible approval of revised master plan principles.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Oh, sorry.
All right, board, so, excuse me. Hello, check, mic check. I'm gonna do the mic check. All right, so tonight, board, Mr. Junty is gonna come up and we're gonna have some information and conversations about our current master plan principles and then, what they look like moving forward. But I really just wanna make sure that we're intentional about taking our time, digesting the information, asking plenty of questions. So the team is already prepared. We know that this may take longer than normal, maybe, just depending on the conversation, but we want it to because we want to make sure that we get all the information out and give you an opportunity to think through it as much as possible, as many questions as you like to. And so, and then what we'll do is come up with an informal consensus, and then then the president will ask for a motion at the end of that. So anyway, Mr. Junty is going to come up now, and we'll talk about the revised master plan principles. This is a dialogue and a conversation, so he doesn't have to get through the entire your presentation before you have a question. If you have a question at that point, you can feel free to stop and ask. And so this is more of an informal conversation.
All right, thank you. Good evening. As we take a look at our current master plan principles, again, these were the ones that were adopted by the board in May of 2003. They do state the campus maximums that facilities would be built at. And then underneath that, obviously, you have some of the guiding principles of the master plan principles. So the numbers and then some of the rationale or things that the members in LCISD felt were important to have in those master plan principles. Again, bottom in bold, the middle school and junior high maximums are not in alignment with the high school maximum. So when you do the math, when you multiply a 1-grade middle school by 4, that does not equal 2,000. It equals 3,000. So I just wanted to point that out, that those numbers are not in alignment. All right, we're going to start with the high schools and move backwards. So what we wanted to do was provide you with the current enrollment of our 6 high schools in the district. We also included, for your informational purposes, the UIL division that those campuses are classified as. And a couple bullet points to note. We do see Fulshear and Foster high schools are projected to receive relief from High School 7. High School 7 was funded in the 2020 bond. The other is George Ranch. We know they did go through a rezoning with Randall High School. And we do have students that remain there due to grandfathering. And the projected reduction over the next 2 years at George Ranch is approximately 300 students over the next 2 years. So obviously that will still keep that school above the 2000 master plan principle.
So, Mr. Junty, if you go back to the first slide, please.
Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure that we're clear on this. So, what Mr. Junty is saying is that our elementary schools right now are built at 750 maximum capacity, but our middle schools and our junior highs are not. So our middle schools are actually built for 680 capacity, and our junior highs are actually built for 1,200 capacity, and then the high schools are built for 2,000 capacity. So if Mr. McKeever will come up and kind of give us an explanation, because he has all the institutional knowledge, everybody. Mr. McKeever knows everything about Lamar CISD. And so I asked the question as to why are these numbers out of line with what we're building? And so I just kind of wanted him to share with the board that he remembers that conversation, actually. So.
Well, it goes back to when we were building Wertheimer, and during the design committee, by looking at these master plan principles, it was brought up, hey, we should be building a 6th grade school for 750. And at that time, if you remember, Erasmo Turan was our secondary ed director, and he said, well, we can't build that 6th grade school for 750 because then that'll just overload the junior high and the high schools. And he said, that's a whole nother team, which is a whole teaching team, science classrooms and regular classrooms. And so when we took that 750 out, it reduced it to 680. And that's where it went.
And so, so that's why those numbers are on the line. And so the reason why we're starting backwards is because what we have to decide now is what's the maximum number we want our high schools to be. And then once we decide that, then we can work our way down to the junior highs, middle schools, and elementary schools. Yes, sir.
Mr. McKeever, thinking back, jog your memory, thinking back to those conversations, I was not on the board then. When you guys were told you could build it for 680 and not the 750, was there any discussion about revising what the public sees and what bond committees are told going forward?
Maximum
On the sheet, because I know it says maximum, so it doesn't necessarily mean they're built for that, but that's the implication. Was there any discussion about revising these numbers for the public's sake back then?
Not during those design meetings, no, sir. And that was for Wertheimer, and that's what I was explaining. It was Wertheimer, which was in 2007, I believe, 2006. Now, I can remember the district going over those master plan principles prior to each bond issue that we went. But, you know, that's what I can remember as we went through the years and the different bonds from the 2003, the 2006, the 2011, the 2014, the 2017 bonds.
Well, I was the only around and paying attention for the 2020, and I can tell you that it was not a thorough discussion that should have been had before we pitched it to the bond committee. It was just a dog and pony show almost. There was no discussion. There was no contemplation about some of these numbers. What's the construction cost? What's the benefit to building a bigger school? So I'm glad you didn't say 2020 bond. Because I've been harping on this for a little while.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not saying we should adjust these numbers, but I'm glad we're having this discussion.
So, are there any questions about so far? Yes, sir. Yes,
I think that's mine. So since we are having this discussion right now and we are about to start a planning meeting for the new 6th grade campus, this will all be adjusted based off of these discussions. So when we start, because I mean, if we're going 6 or we're going 750.
What we're looking to do is if there are any adjustments that the board wants to make, those adjustments would be made for future bonds. Because the planning for the 2020 bond was made at the current capacities for the campuses, the current enrollments.
Even though it says 750, but it's the current, what we're going at is for the middle school, 680.
Yes, correct. It was.
So we did it for 680 even though it says 750. So knowing the growth that we're experiencing for that Wright and Randall complex over there, so we're gonna build that one for 680.
that's not necessarily true.
Okay.
And so
So
we've had to go
not-
back to the drawing board. So right now, it's a repeat design, and that repeat design is 680, I believe, right?
Yes.
And so if the board chooses, then, you know, because we have the actual additional cost per square footage also. So if the board chooses and we have the finances, then we would just have the architects
Just redo.
add on a wing or something like that, you know, to fit for the 750. And so it is not out of the question for the board to be able to do that. It's just a conversation and decision you have to make.
Right now, none of our middle schools are over 680.
Built for 680.
No, but not, if
Their
I'm looking
enrollment.
at the enrollment,
Their current enrollment, not one is over 680.
Right, the current enrollment, yes, ma'am, that's right.
But that has a snowball effect as well. If Wright and Randall aren't built for that additional capacity, 750 times 4 gives you assuming all enrollment stays the same through junior high and high school. At 680, you're still over our current capacity at around 2,700. So if you increase the middle school, that has a negative impact on the junior high and high school.
Will that keep them from moving there? I mean, that area is only going to be developed more. That there's nothing, they're not going to stop building houses just because we say, hey, we're built for this.
All right, as we looked at the high schools, we wanted to give the board some idea, and these are in current dollars. We took a look at our current 2,000 student capacity high school, currently about 395,000 square feet, and we looked at estimated price of about $325 per square foot to add, and we did 3 iterations, one of adding 2,150, which is 6 classrooms and about 10,600 square feet, and it gives you the cost. We looked at 2,300, adding 12 classrooms, again, doubling the square footage and doubling the cost, almost doubling the cost, and 2,500 student capacity, adding 20 classrooms and over 30,000 square feet at an estimated today's dollar cost of just under $10 million. And I do want to point out that in all 3 of these iterations, that some large areas become larger as we add students. So in all 3 of these, and that's factored into this $325 per square foot, because as you add students, hallways get a little bit wider. We don't just add classrooms. We want to make sure that as you're adding those students, that the cafeteria can house those students so that programming isn't negatively impacted by an increase in the number of students. So as you increase the number of students, you increase the square footage in that. And those types of holistic numbers are captured in these 3 estimates. Yes, ma'am.
do any of these 3 scenarios make us increase the amount of land we need to buy? Or can we build it on the same land?
That's a great question, and the answer is we looked at that, and we do feel that in all 3 of these iterations, we can do it on our current secondary footprint, which is
Because then we'd have to
130
factor in the
140
cost of
acres.
land.
Correct. Yes,
So what you're saying on this slide is that there's no, what I'm seeing is there's no cost benefit in terms of building, in terms of construction, to make them larger. There might be in terms of staffing, but if you're just if it's $325 per square foot for 2,000 student capacity, and you're not getting a benefit of a lower cost per square foot by adding on.
that is correct.
So where is the benefit? What are the benefits of going from 2,000 students to 2,500 students? Is it in staffing?
It's also, so another conversation we have to have is we have about 256 portable buildings in our district. And so another conversation we have to have is how do we get out of the portable buying business so we can make sure that our students are actually inside the main facility for safety reasons. And so one reason is I guess one benefit is that you can have more students inside the building itself. So if there's ever an issue, a lockdown or something like that, we can make sure all of our students are safe and secure. And so we do want to come up with a plan on how we start reducing the number of portable buildings that we have in our district.
So just to clarify, we're not talking about this creating a cost savings. The benefit is going to be security and the fact that we don't have to have kids in portables.
That's one of the main benefits, yes, sir.
But I would throw out though, but if you're gonna do 2,500 versus 2,000, you're gonna eventually need one less high school at some point. So you do have $150 million savings at some point.
But what I'm
Not,
seeing
you're
here,
right, you're right, on the one building or the one high school, number 7 or number 8,
Yeah.
I think you're right.
but what I'm saying is, if you're talking about, based on this, this is $325 per square foot for a 2,000 square foot high school. It's still $325 per square foot for 2,150, 2,300, 2,500. So according to this, what's the difference between having $325 per square foot here or having another high school where it's going to be $325 per square foot?
The
We're not-
land, the pool, the football stadium, all that stuff is in consideration.
But I assume that the land, the pool, all that is built into the $325 per square foot, is it not?
Again, what we said is that the existing footprint of when we purchase land for our secondary sites would be able to accommodate any of these iterations.
But this $325 per square foot for a 2,000 student capacity high school, is that inclusive of the land and the pool and all of the facilities?
Included in that number.
Kevin, the only thing I'm thinking is the land included in that 325?
Cost of the land is not.
Okay. So the land purchase is not, we purchase the land separately, but for the cost of constructing the building and all of those typical things that we see at the high school, that's included in the $325.
Okay.
So let me clarify. Let me clarify. I think what Trustee Hunter's asking. So every high school campus comes with a turf stadium, a turf field for soccer, right? Like a little indoor complex, track, possibly a practice pool, and so everything that comes with the high school complex, everything, is that a part of the 325, or the 325 is just for the high school building, the instructional building?
That's everything. That's a construction cost for the entire complex.
Including the land,
Land
not
is
the
separate.
land?
Land is
Okay.
separate.
So, okay.
I don't think it's the pool, because we've been adding the pool separately, unless we're gonna
Right.
start putting that into the bond with the high school, but we've been doing those separately at this time.
So there would be a potential cost savings in that we're not having to buy as much land. Because if you build the high schools a little bit bigger, then instead of, if you build, what, 2,500 capacity high schools, that's 7,500 students, and you would ordinarily need to build 4 high schools to fit that. So you
Right.
would save the money of the land on one high school for every, like, 4 that you.
Yes, because we don't need to increase for our footprint. Yes.
So in our, I don't guess it was included in our last study, on the growth of the district, but how many schools are we projected to need with the amount of space that we have within Lamar CISD? I mean, surely that can be figured based off of.
Well, I'm glad you asked.
Can I tell you in February?
This is Stacy Tapera. She's one of our wonderful representatives from PASA.
And we are in the process of updating the study for the district this year, and we're planning to present it in February. I can speak to the data from last year, and if you can repeat the question specifically, are you talking about high schools
Right, just
In
high
the-
schools right now,
in the next decade?
sure.
Definitely high school 7, and definitely high school 8. And quite honestly, I can't remember exactly when high school 9 falls in. I'll have to look it up. And
Yeah,
don't
I remember our
have it.
conversation. It was high school 7 and 8, and 9 was a strong possibility, but you wanted to wait until you got the new data to make sure.
There you go.
And of course, that takes an account of where we need those high schools, because you wouldn't necessarily say, oh, we're building a high school here, but look at the growth way out there in Simonton and have to bring unless we rezoned everything, which is a possibility, but it's also where the need is, also dictates where we build a high school.
Yes, ma'am, and that's why we work with our demographers to show us where the next high-need area
Even if
would
we
be.
went to 2,300 kids, that's still, the need could still be in the same areas because of the growth that we're seeing. And, but I'm just gonna state right now, because I want to put this out there, anytime I start hearing that we need to lower how many high schools and pack them in so we have less football teams, think about the kids then that don't get to participate in those sports. And then those kids are the ones that possibly we need to grab up. I'm not saying we need to not change things, but we need to change them diligently so that we are still being able to incumbent as many children in our extracurricular activities so that they have those opportunities. Because there are school districts that have one high school and they get to high school and then they don't get to participate in a lot of different activities.
You say we need to make sure that they're grabbed up. What do you mean by that exactly? That there's more opportunities for
Well,
kids
we just need to make sure as we are making our plans that we are not overdoing a school so that when students get there, they don't have the same opportunities as a smaller school. We just have to be diligent of that.
Well,
And I know that doesn't actually come out as numbers, but it is something that we need to take care of with our children.
well, to your point, last year my daughter tried out for seventh grade basketball. There were 60 kids that tried out. And
So think of if
that's
she was in a school twice that size.
I understand.
So an important question for me, because one of the reasons that we moved to LCISD was because we had the neighborhood school model and we had smaller schools than neighboring school districts. But it doesn't seem like a question necessarily of should we have smaller schools or should we have larger schools? Because to me, it seems like the most important question for me is if we decided to stay with our current model and have smaller schools, can we can we find land and can we build the amount of schools that we need to keep up with the growth and not be in the portable business? To me, it seems like our hands might be bound. We can't keep the current model because there's just not enough available, reasonably priced land out there for us. Is that true?
I think one of the things you said, those words, reasonably priced. Land, just like construction, land is becoming more expensive very quickly, that we're seeing, and we are trying to get out ahead of our land purchases as we work with our demographer to identify where those sites will be 3 or 4 or 5 years in the future. But that is a challenging process to acquire land.
As we know.
So what's the answer?
The answer is, to me, regardless of the size, schools, we're going to continue to work really hard to purchase the land, but it's going to be hard work. Can we do it? Would it be a little bit easier if for example the high schools were larger and we didn't need them quite so often? Sure, but it's going to be a challenge.
Are there any of our school floor plans right now that, and I think I know the answer to this, that we can expand on and not have to actually purchase and go back to the architects and start from scratch again? Because that does cost several $1 million to do.
Yes, ma'am, and we have some iterations as we go through the various
Okay,
levels
then
that we
let's-
had our architects take a look at.
Okay, good.
Yes, on our existing footprints.
Good.
And I can tell you that for our existing footprint of our high school, we can add, because they're 2 stories, as we add additional classrooms to the hallways, you're at the first floor and the second floor. And there are some ways that we can do that, again, to keep it on the footprint without having to do a complete redesign of our high school.
Mr. Gentry, without going to a third level, do you know, is 2,500 the max in the current footprint that we buy, land size that we buy? Or has that been explored?
That's a question that we would have to look at further with our architects, is to find out what's the tipping point to where we would have to do a redesign. But that's not an.
So it may or may not be the limit for the current land size we buy, 2,500. It could potentially, you're saying, is you're not sure if 2,500 is the max.
That's correct.
So I just want to make sure we go back to Trustee Hunt's question. So the main thing I said at the beginning, I want to make sure all your questions get answered. And so I believe you asked, basically, can we keep up, if we keep the numbers the same, can we keep up with the growth? And the answer is no. We can't keep up with the growth and get out of the portable buying business. And so we would have to make sure that, if we kept with the same numbers, then in our bond or wherever, we would have to make sure we had funding in there for portable buildings, because we have people are coming faster than we can build for a campus. And so that's the answer. No, we won't be able to keep up.
Is there a suggested, amount that we raise to? I mean, do you have a suggestion?
Our goal was to provide the board with options for discussion.
Okay. I mean, I feel to me like we have history of what we used to pay for land and what land used to be donated to us and what we now pay for land. It's historically, we can see that it's not getting any cheaper. It's only going up, and it's harder to find. And developers, it used to be a great thing whenever a developer had a school in their neighborhood. They wanted it. It was great, and they were glad to give us a discounted rate. And now, not so much.
I'm fine. That is no longer the case.
I mean, that is it.
Yeah,
So,
that's no longer the case. Is they want us to pay top premium for
Yeah.
land,
Yeah.
and they rather not sell it to us because they will get more from rooftops.
make more money.
They would.
Yeah.
Will it pose any type of transportation issues to have some schools that are significantly larger than other schools?
Mike?
I think the short answer would be no. I mean, other than, as far as us transporting the kids, we're gonna put the same number of kids on the bus, so whether a school has 30 buses going into it or 50, for us, we would just encounter the same problems that everybody else would. I mean, you've seen what it looks like, or what it looked like going into George Ranch, with almost 3,000 kids there. So you have the traffic from the parents as well. But as far as our department, it's not going to make a big difference whether we have 2,000 or 2,500 kids in the district.
Similar question, is it going to cause any issues to have, say if we choose to have a larger elementary school max, and say we put that where it's zoned to a middle school and a junior high that have a lower max, is that going to cause issues? So say you put 1,000 capacity elementary school in the middle of Fulshire, and then you've got Roberts, which its maximum capacity is 680. Is that going to cause an issue that you now have a fairly large school that is flowing into a school that is part of the older model and has lower capacity?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It would be a logistical issue that might require rezoning. Again, yes, you would. It would create a capacity issue at that campus.
Which is why you want to work backwards, right, from the high school?
Yes, ma'am. That's why we chose to work backwards, because once we decide the maximum number we want our high schools to be, then every other conversation will just fall in alignment. That will dictate basically the campus size for every school after that, under that feeds the high school.
Did you have a, Mr.
I have
Welch?
two questions. Of the current 6 high schools, the footprint that we have, the land footprint, is there room to build an additional wing at any of those schools right now to increase the capacity?
The
Or do we
current
not-
high schools.
At the current high schools, or do we not know that? Could you build another wing at Foster somewhere, on that piece of land, or Fulshire, or George Rancher? I don't think
Given the
Lamar-
way that they're, and again, we've got a different footprint for a couple of our newer high schools. What you would look at possibility would be extending some of our finger hallways to do that. So we'd have to take a look at, given the parking, traffic flow, et cetera, is it possible to add that onto the existing hallway sections that we have? We'd have to have the architects look into that. That's a good question.
That might be,
So you're
might-
asking about adding capacity at our
yeah, so we
current
have
school.
2,000 capacity at Foster, let's say, and let's say we increased it to 2,500. All of a sudden, that relieves what high school number 7 and number 8 need to be built to, or, allows them to be built for a larger number, and everybody still has a seat without going into a temp building.
Right, and that would be something we'd go back and have to take a look at with architects. What can we do? Because again, it would be, and, we would have to not only add classroom space, but you have to look at adding the other things like air conditioning, et cetera,
Sure.
to go with that. So the infrastructure to go with the addition, but we can definitely explore it.
I think that's worth exploring.
That would require another bond though, wouldn't it?
Sure, but might we go to the voters and say, we want to build an additional wing here, an additional
I'm
wing
just
there,
saying
for
that-
much cheaper than $150 million for.
But then
high
you're
school?
having to look at the cafeteria, and you're having to look at the restrooms.
It's all part of the equation that the architects can look at.
But those don't get larger just because you add wings.
Maybe we knock out the wall of the cafeteria and expand it. I mean, there's all kind of options.
I know in my experience, retrofitting and renovations are more costly than new construction. So what we want to do is, I know you said to Trustee West to research that, we want to look at the square footage prices for retrofitting and renovation construction costs. Because I know that is quite that's a little bit more, quite a bit more.
Industry
Quite a bit more
standards
than
is
new
typically
construction.
40%.
About an additional 40%?
Yes,
Yeah.
for renovations.
Does a larger capacity high school have any effect on athletics other than they're playing larger schools and potentially better competition?
And that's a great question, and that's why we added that information on the slide to talk about, where our schools currently fall. But yes, it does impact that. They're going to be playing schools that are larger.
The cutoff for 5A and 6A is about a little bit over 2,200 students. So right now we have Foster, Fulshire, right now on the cusp of being 6A, along with George Ranch, and then more than likely Randall is 5A because of the multiplier they have, and so we could foresee having possibly 4 6A campuses and 2 5A campuses.
Something to your question, something that Ms. Danziger brought up is the bigger and bigger, the less opportunity that some of them have because of all the competition. So that affects all of UIL, really.
And can I say, this is a hard conversation because there are a lot of key factors that play into this. Because as an educator, I know, and as a student that struggled, I know that students that aren't bought in, they're not connected to the campus, are less likely to be successful. And so if they don't have the opportunities to participate in something, then the research shows that they won't be as successful as other students. And so I think that's what Ms. Danziger was saying earlier, was, we have to grab them up, meaning we have to try to find as many programs and activities as possible. I know this coming year, water polo is going to be an official UIL sport for us. And so, we have to be intentional about how do we get as many kids to be connected in some kind of way to the campus so they can feel appreciated and be successful. So it's just a never-ending cycle of a lot of questions that we have to answer and just eventually come up with a decision. But it's a lot of information to absorb, and so that's why I want you to keep asking questions.
We want to move on to the next slide?
We can.
Okay. Are y'all? Okay.
So we move to the junior high. Our current junior highs are constructed at approximately 195,000 square feet, and the current capacity for that footprint is 1,200. And we know the master plan principle states a maximum capacity of 1,400. And the option to increase the current footprint from 1,200 to 1,250, so adding 50 students at the campus, bringing in line with the numbers. It would be adding 2,000 square feet, and that's at a cost of about $650,000 for the junior high design. And again, the option there, and where we landed on that number, is 1,250 for 2 grades. If you multiply that for 4 grades, it would be the 2,500. So I just wanted to give you an idea why we did what we did with the math, to give you some options.
Dr. Nivens, you mentioned to me about the 50 students. Why is 50 a good number to increase it by? What does that kind of mean for the campus?
The 50 numbers, the 50 students that we talked about earlier was really more aligned to the elementary campuses. But here we talked about 1,250 because that's aligned with maybe a 2,500 student high school. And so, but also we know junior high and middle school, brain research shows that students' that their brains start to redevelop. And so they really need to be in an environment, and the people out there that deal with those students know what I'm talking about. Their brains start to redevelop, and so they really need to be in an environment to where you can really help them grow and mature at the pace they need to. And so that's why a 1,250 junior high would be the maximum that I would propose because of just the needs, the physical needs of the students in the building. But as when we get to elementary schools, we'll talk about the other 50s.
And maybe I'm getting them mixed up, but I thought you had mentioned that's one like teaching team kind of thing that would be adding one more.
All right. Well, we talked about So we talked about one grade level, and so up in the campus is about one grade level. So that is just one teaching team per subject, and you really won't have to have a whole nother office staff or nurse or counseling. All the support services, but that'll be one additional core subject team per campus. Yes, ma'am. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on. Okay.
Now, I do
Oh,
have another
sorry.
question, on the 2,500, going back to the high school, excuse me. What would that do for like the administrative staff of a school, of a high school? Do you increase it by 500, the capacity of 500? Because we already have schools over 2,500 right now, even though it's not built. Would we plan on that? How many more administrators, for instance?
Right. We have staffing guidelines in place, and so right now, we said George Ranch is around 2,600 students, and so it would be the same number of staff. And so I think we said every 500 students. I can't remember what our number was. I think every 500 students we add an additional assistant principal. Every 900 students was a counselor or something like that. But we can get those staffing guidelines to you. But right now, George Ranch is staffed appropriately for the number of students they have.
26.
So it would just look like the
Pretty much
George
like
Ranch team.
George Ranch. Got
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
All right. To our middle schools. Current middle school design is 86,000 square feet, and it's built for a student capacity of 680. The master plan principles that talk about the maximum capacity of 750. And so a possible adjustment of middle school maximum enrollment to 625. Right, so one of the things that we talked about was, the fact that we're building it at 680 right now, even if this number was adjusted to 625, to be in line with that 2,500 for 4 grades, leaving it at this number would allow for some extra capacity at that campus, given the current design.
Do we know how many 6th graders are over at Wright right now, if they had their own building?
Dr. Moss is looking at that right now.
Because I know that they're pretty crowded over there.
No pressure, Dr. Moss.
We're friends. She'll forgive me.
Just sixth grade.
Just sixth grade, because I see how many it write under junior high, but what would this number be if we pulled the sixth graders out? So what you're trying to propose is that we really don't need to change anything about our sixth grade schools right now?
Well, our design.
Of our
that-
design,
that
unless
gives
we
us the
want to make it
capacity,
smaller.
Really gives us some ability to absorb a little bit of growth or overage.
Okay.
I have a question. This is a very touchy subject in Lamar, and I'm just asking the question. I'm not proposing anything. I just want everybody who's listening to hear that. Would there be a cost benefit to building a 3-grade junior high, but yet having the architects make sure the sixth grade is pretty much isolated from the 7th and 8th graders? Because I know that I have 2 teenagers in my house. They've been past the 6th grade. I know it's a very interesting time in a kid's life. I respect the fact that we've had a separate campus, but I would assume, I mean, you definitely need more land to build a separate building. You need a second cafeteria as opposed to a slightly bigger cafeteria and all.
If you were talking about that school within a school concept.
School within
yes,
a school.
There would be some structures and areas that would have to be duplicated to serve 1 grade and then the other 2 grades. So yeah, you would have a larger footprint and you would have some duplication of things like a cafeteria, possibly an additional gym, those types of things for that combined 6, 7, 8 campus.
Thinking off the top of your head, because I don't think you've researched this yet, maybe you have, what would be the cost savings to build it all under one roof? Versus
I do not have that in my
2
head.
separate buildings with the capacities you're talking about.
Yeah, we'd have to dig into that and take a look at exactly what that would be. And I guess one of the questions would be, at what capacity would we look at for the 3 grades? Would we keep it in line with what we're discussing? So there's just, and I do know that design does exist in some districts where 6th grade is kind of as a house. But we could definitely take a look at that and bring that information.
I would really like that to digest and to process it and hear the community's input on something like that.
Anybody else?
Yeah, they've given that input prior to the suburbs flooding into Lamar. And that's where we're at now. We're no longer a rural district. We are a suburban/rural district. And
But during
there's a lot
our,
of- and
just even, 3 years ago when we did the strategic planning, all 10 meetings, that was a huge information that we did bring back, because there's still a lot of people. But that is something that we can ask the public again, but it is something that a lot of people do move to our district just because of that.
was there ever a discussion about that idea of having basically a school within a school?
Not a school within a school, but we've had 6th grade with, I think it was 4, 5, and 6 at once upon a time. Yeah.
Taylor Ray was actually built as an intermediate.
I was there
Yeah.
during that time.
And it was probably right after you left is when they split the 6th grades away.
That's exactly when it happened, right after I left.
Anyway. But I know in the last 3 to 4 years, we have asked that question.
Okay, thank you. Moving on?
Sure. Trying to be a good educator and have my good wait time.
I appreciate it.
All right. At the elementary level, currently our elementaries are built at a 750 student capacity. The master plan principal is at a 750 student capacity. The current design is 105,679 square feet, and our current construction price is $278 a square foot. This number is very accurate because we just had one bid. what we looked at was moving that number from, giving you the option to move it from 750 to an 800 student capacity. And really the driver in that was just recently when legislated from half-day to full-day pre-K. And we know that however many pre-K classrooms were being utilized for a morning and an afternoon session, those became all day. So that doubled your need for the number of pre-K classrooms. So what the proposal is to move it from 750 to 800 as an option, add two pre-K classrooms. It's about 2,000 square foot at about $556,000 for that add. We did look, and this move would not require us to create any larger cafeteria space, and it could be added on to our existing footprint.
Any questions?
Now, are we looking at doing this for just the new campuses, or do we want to? Because I know when we made this design, it was that we could add on to these elementary designs.
Right,
Correct.
the way the hallways are designed, that additional classrooms can be added at the end of those hallways.
And that was a question we asked once they made all-day pre-K, were the schools going to be able to handle? And do we know which schools are not being able to handle them? That might be some information we might need. Can't handle having all-day pre-K? Okay. I just said, have we looked into which elementary schools are not being able to handle having all-day pre-K on their campus and are we having to move kids around, or are we having to find more portable space so that we can have more pre-K on that campus?
So right now, according to the conversation that the area superintendents have had with the elementaries, that they can all absorb their pre-K numbers. And so even with the 6 or 7 campuses that feed into Seguin, those kids could go back to those campuses and be inside the building. So right now they're saying they can all absorb them, and that's coming from the principals.
Are the, I don't want to say proposals, but like 800 student capacity and what we talked about for middle school and junior high, is that going to get us long-term out of the portable business?
Long-term, yes, sir, long-term. And so that's one piece of it. The other piece is, because what we're talking about now, if we don't go back and retro or renovate anything, this will be for upcoming buildings. But if you look at your numbers that you have in front of you, we still have quite a few elementary schools that are over capacity right now. And as I said, we have 256 portables in our district. So then the other conversation is how do we get all of our campuses back into alignment with their capacity?
Is that right? 21 of 28 campuses have portables?
Yes.
So we just had to figure out how do we get all of our campuses back into alignment with their capacity, so then we can get out of the portable buying business. We never will be out of it completely, but we do want to reduce that significantly.
So how do we get back in line with the capacity of the current campuses?
This is asking me the tough questions, aren't you? Well, that is, we have to phase in a little bit at a time, rezoning all the campuses that are overstaffed. That are overpopulated. And so we have some campuses that are underutilized. We have some that are severely over, like Hubernac, 1,300 students. And so we just have to present a plan to the board on what that looks like and phase in over time, over a few years. How do we start rezoning different sections of the district so we can get all those campuses back in alignment while we're working with PASA for the growth that's coming. And so it'll never be an exact science, but that's the answer. And we all know rezoning is a very hard conversation to have. It's a very emotional conversation. Yes, sir.
Do these numbers include the students that are coming back Monday from virtual?
I think they do.
Those were current enrollments, so whatever is reflected on the campus website, that was the data that was pulled for that report. So does that reflect that?
So that's an answer. Do we have that answer?
I need to
No.
Looking at the elementary.
We're looking at elementary, yeah.
We don't have that, this would not be in there. If you look at currently right now, Morgan, and if you were to look at Campbell's kind of numbers, they're a little possibly less than that.
Yeah.
Those kids are in our total, but they're not in that particular campus currently right now.
Right, so like Bentley shows 989, but Monday they could be at 1,000.
Yes, yes. Because the virtual students coming back.
Virtual students will be back. So
Yes.
these numbers here don't represent those virtual students that will be there next week.
That's correct.
Sixth grade is returning, but elementary
Right.
will return.
Huh? Just a little bit.
That answer your question, Trustee Hunt?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, and again, just to build on that, the shift from half-day to full-day pre-K creates a potential need for additional classrooms, and the increased pre-K capacity could allow students to attend pre-K at their home campuses.
You want to move forward?
What is there a sheet that has actual proposal on it? I mean, all in one? No. Do I? We have a legal question, so we are going to go into closed session. So the time is, I can't see it on my,
6:58.
6:58 p.m. Okay, let's see. I already said the time. We're adjourning to closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551.071, 551.072, 551.074, and 551.082, the Open Meetings Act, to discuss either personnel, land acquisition, or consultation with our attorney. Okay.
Alex, the door.
What
Okay,
slide
so
would you
we are
like?
now back in open session. It is 7:11, thank you. And we have a quorum. Okay, so,
Okay.
Dr. Newton?
So, Madam President, trustees, what we're recommending would be to revise the principals to 2,500 student high school, and for the junior highs to be at, what did we say?
12:50?
12:50.
1250, so the question I have is, I can't remember what we discussed. We didn't say we would just, the enrollment would be 1250, but the building would still be at 1400, correct? The enrollment would be at 1250.
The
but
building is
still be
currently built at 1,200.
1200, right, okay, so we
Yes.
would increase building, okay, 1250 for junior highs. Go ahead, say next.
All right.
Middle school would stay at 680, or no, 750, sorry, 750. And then the elementaries would go up to 800. Is that right? Y'all help me with my math.
Yes, sir.
So it's 2,500, 1250, 750, and 800. Is
So
that right?
we would only need to maybe make some tweaks to the high school and the elementary school?
Help me with my math on that, would you, Kevin?
Okay, so currently, high schools is 2,000 max. We're saying the recommendation is to go
Yes,
to
ma'am.
2,500.
Yes, ma'am.
Junior highs, it's really right now being built for 1,200.
Right, we would keep it at that.
1400.
We're not going to 1,250?
We would go to. We would have the enrollment at 1250, and the actual building itself would be at 1400.
1400.
And then middle schools from 750 to 680. No, sorry,
It would still stay the size is set.
size, but enrollment is 680.
Yes,
Right.
ma'am.
And-
Enrollment would be at 625. Size would be at,
Is it built at 680?
Yes.
Okay,
it's built at
680.
680, so we'll leave it at 680, yes. Thank you. We'll leave it at 680. So actually, that number will come down on the actual master plan principle. But we keep the enrollment at 625.
Okay, so 680 enrollment, 625.
And I think what we'll probably need to do also is, when we republish these, is have an enrollment capacity and a building capacity. Have 2 columns so people can see that and it can be more clear.
Would you explain the difference in those two numbers?
The enrollment, so like I said, for the middle school, we'll say the enrollment capacity, the maximum we would do is 625, but the building capacity would be at 680 for any kind of one-off additional enrollment. And so the actual enrollment will be capped at 625, facility capacity would be at 680. That's how we would title those, so it could be clearly delineated.
So we're providing a buffer.
Mhm.
Instead of getting portables, we just are building in a buffer.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's review the numbers one more time. So elementary, I'm gonna start with how it's listed on our, our master plan. Elementary would be 800 enrollment.
Elementary would be 800 period, enrollment and
building.
facility,
Right,
yes.
so 800
Is that
and
right, Chris?
800.
Yes,
I need,
that is
that right?
correct.
Okay.
That's
So-
correct.
So
But I-
that's up by 50, okay?
So that building would need to go through some changes when we put it out for a bond.
For
The
50
cost.
additional students, would that need, what would say the footprint was again on that? About 2,000 square feet
Right there.
at $270 a square foot.
So in today's dollars, that number would be the impact on the construction budget.
Okay, that's, okay.
Okay, so that's elementary is 800 and 800. So then middle schools, it's 680 for building capacity and 625 enrollment,
Correct.
Yes, ma'am.
And
okay?
so no changes there.
Well, on our actual master plan
No, but I'm talking about
principles,
cost-wise.
cost-wise, correct, okay. So, but
I'm just
master
looking
plan,
at
yeah,
cost right now.
okay. And then junior high is 14 building size, 1,400 building size, 1,250 enrollment, correct?
12, we would be
Come on up.
increasing to
Kevin.
1250.
Right.
Come on up, Kevin. What is it, what we discussed, Kevin?
1,400 and 1,250.
Currently, we build a junior high
For 1200.
Okay.
And
So
we're-
what is the proposed new building capacity?
12, so
1250.
enrollment's 1,250 and building's
Oh.
1,250.
Correct.
1,250, 1,250.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
So
Okay.
that will cost us.
A little bit for that additional.
By 50,
Okay.
Right.
okay. And then the high school would be 2,500
And 25.
and 2,500.
Yes.
Okay, just so we're
And
all
that's
have
about,
the same.
almost $10 million.
So, an increase for elementary, decrease for middle, decrease for junior high. No, actually, increase. I'm sorry, it's hard, we're looking at these numbers and then, anyways, and then increase for high school. So these numbers would give us, starting backwards from the high schools, it would all align with
Yes.
the rest of the grades.
Yes, ma'am.
So why are we building in a buffer for the middle schools but not the other schools?
Because the middle school's already built for that capacity.
Okay.
They're already built for that, and so it wouldn't be any kind of additional cost for those middle schools.
That's our current design.
Okay.
Now, our current design for middle schools is 680 capacity already.
And do we know if, say for the elementary schools, where there's a proposal to add on 50 students, would we be able to just tweak our current plans
Our current footprint?
Yeah.
Yes, no redesign will be required.
Okay.
The way the footprint is set up, we can add classrooms to the end of the hallway.
Is that true for the junior high and the junior highs and the high school as well?
Yes, they'll still fit on the footprint. The junior high, again, we're looking at possibly 2 or 3 classrooms. We can definitely add that without changing the design of the building or increasing space sizes. But for the high school, it will require somewhat of a redesign because we'll have to have a larger cafeteria, wider hallways, et cetera. But we can add those to the ends of the hallways, yes. Won't require a total redesign.
So it would just be the cost of the architects going back and fixing what they already have, which would be a cost, but not the cost of a whole new design.
Correct.
So just to recap, like if everything we've kind of talked about, it would help getting rid of portables, which would increase safety for us to have the bigger high schools. No, not really much extra cost except for some of the land to continue that. As far as we were talking about having the same number, it's just having the different kids at different schools, but it wouldn't increase the costs.
The land
necessarily.
purchases would be the same size acreages.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then transportation would be fine with the bigger numbers. And then as far as UIL and the size, it's 2,200. So having the difference between 2,200 and 2,500 is going to be the same.
As far as
UI?
UI classification? No, those campuses will go up to 6A.
But I'm saying if we did 2,200 versus
Yes, ma'am.
2,500, that 300 is going to be in the same
Yes,
category.
ma'am. Yes,
right?
ma'am.
So it's,
When, just one other question, maybe you'll probably know the answer. When you go up to 6A, are you allowed more players on your team, or it's the same amount as whether you have a 5A or 6A?
Right. So, yeah, high school is not regulated by the number of students on the team, but it's how many students actually on the field. And I'm football-minded, so, all you
Okay.
can have is 11 guys on the
Okay.
field. So, but
But
they
I
can
know-
have 100 guys on the sideline, but
But then you're having to outfit them in something.
that's right.
So
That's right. You
where
have to
the
buy
cost
uniforms
comes
and
in.
helmets and shoulder pads and all those other things that go along with that.
So, I mean, you're still having a cost somewhere.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
any other questions?
Is there an expectation that we'll still continue to have space available for portable buildings if they're needed? Or will that get eaten up by adding additional space?
That's a great question. We'll have to, we need to take a look at our footprints and how we do that. It is always wise and advantageous to identify an area where portables could be located, because when you build the campus, you run utilities there and leave them underground. So even if we added space, we would still do that because that's proactive.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Number 7 of the master plan principles is to provide adequate space for community, for school community-based education programs. Is that the athletic fields and things like that? Is that what that?
It could be any,
Because we haven't discussed any of the other points of the master plan
Right.
principles except the numbers. So I think that we should possibly consider discussing these.
school community-based, I guess that could be anything from an after-school program coming in. I don't know exactly what the definition would be of a school community.
And then
Based
number
education.
4, and I want to be very clear on this because I have a friend of mine in Cy Fair who got in trouble because he was quoted out of context in the media. Number 4, to reflect the ethnic balance of the school districts in grades 6 to 12. We currently have one of the tracks that is very out of balance, the red track. So does this statement need to be modified? Or eliminated, or left alone?
Well, it is a good question. And so it's always best practice that your student population and your teaching population mirror one another. And so if we are not going to address that, then we have to make sure that when students walk into the building, they see professionals that look like them. Is the best way I can explain that. And so it's just a matter of a conversation, and if the board wants to make a decision. But to do that, but that also means that we will have to rezone Right now, we were talking about rezoning elementaries to get them back in alignment. But if this is something that the board would like me to tackle, then we can definitely come up with a plan to do that. Just know we will rezone that.
A plan to do what exactly?
To rezone and have a more ethnically balanced, all of our high schools be more ethnically balanced. But that comes with maybe busing students across town. I mean, that
Right.
comes with a lot of different unintended consequences.
So my philosophy is that people buy a house, either they're not thinking about, they don't have kids yet, they're not thinking about it, what school my kid goes to, or they buy it based on where my kids will go to school. And in today's world, people my age, 50-ish and below, I don't think we really think about ethnicity very much. I know that's the general rule. I know there's always exceptions. So when I buy a house, or someone buys a house in my neighborhood or the neighborhood next to me, I live in a very diverse ethnic neighborhood. I would hate kids in my neighborhood to be bused to Fulshear High School just to achieve an ethnic balance. I think the kids in my neighborhood, no matter what their race is, and I got them all. I'm one of 3 or 4 different races that's prominent in our neighborhood. They should go, in my opinion, to the high school that is closest geographically to them. And so because of that, and based upon that context, I think that we should either eliminate number 4 or modify it to something closer to what you said, Dr. Nimitz.
Right. Well, I just want to say that, as I said, students should see professionals that mirror them, that look like them. But at the end of the day, they're all my kids. They're all our kids. And so it doesn't matter where they walk, they're all going to be loved equally.
Yes.
And so, I think that goes without being said. So it's just, if that's what the board's pleasure is, then we can definitely do that. Strike it or modify it.
I know this was talked about way back when, and I'm trying to remember, but I think it is more of not just a balance that you have like 50-50 or 25-25, or that it's just that, like you said, that we pay attention that there are other diversity and ethnicity on each campus, and that we have personnel and students so they can have a feeling of belonging. I don't think when this was done, even back over the years, that anybody thought that you could take one high school and have everything balanced equally, because I don't think it's ever have been. So unless we want to change the verbiage, that we're just trying to make sure that we reflect the diversity of our district in each campus. If you want to change it to something like that, but I think it still needs to be that we are aware that we have a broad range of students in our district, and that we will try, when we are rezoning or putting new schools together, that we don't just put all these over here and all, that we pay attention to that when we are rezoning. So, I don't know how you want to, I don't want to cut it out completely, but I think if we need to modify it or change it.
Well, my wordsmith is Miss Sonia Cole Hamilton, and so I know if we give her some time to come up with the right phrase. I just put her on the spot too. That's why she's drinking that water.
She knows.
That's why some of them say that's a very good question.
But I would think about something, definitely embracing diversity.
Well, celebrating diversity.
Celebrating diversity. But that's a conversation, and that's something that we could talk about and possibly bring at the next board meeting and give Ms. Cole Hamilton and her team some time to work through that wording and vet it and make sure that it's appropriate.
Is it possible to add a when possible? Like if there's a situation where we have a zoning and we're thinking, okay, what are some of the, deciding factors that we could use here? And that could be one of them versus making sure it's all, but it's part of the thought process, something more like that.
Maybe the word should here and there.
Not shall, but
Not
should.
shall, but should.
May.
Because as I'm thinking about this more, this doesn't necessarily say in the student population. So I get your
Right.
point, Dr. Nimmons. I think it should be modified, definitely, in some way, shape, or form.
Well, if the board is okay, if you allow us a little bit of time to come up with something and then present that to the board, possibly just coming Tuesday or the subsequent meeting, we'd like to do that.
And I think your answer number 7, it was when we do allow some churches and some Cub Scout groups and some other neighborhood activities, if they want to use our schools, that we have adequate space for them. I know some schools have soccer in the back that they use on the weekends.
Right,
That
we rent out gym space, cafeteria space, things like that for
So,
other,
and
other
is
groups to
that,
come in.
that's what I was thinking of when I read that, but maybe that's not what it really was.
I think that's a very good point, Kay. I think that I would recommend that the wordsmith, our resident wordsmith over here, work on number 7 too, to kind of update that a little bit, because it's very vague. Whenever I asked the question, no one could immediately answer it, because I like the idea of churches using our facilities and soccer teams I like that, but that's not reflected in the wording here at all. It doesn't, because we're gonna have a gym or a cafeteria that a church could rent out with or without the statement. So, or we're gonna have an athletic field for our own teams that maybe a select club team rents on the weekends.
Right.
Regardless if the statement's there or not. So I think this statement's a little vague and outdated in today's world.
Mr. Welch, to your point, I was thinking too, like providing adequate space versus opportunities to use our facilities. You know what I mean? Even
Maybe
something
that's a good
different like
change.
that, yeah.
Good way to go.
What about, did anybody want to discuss number 2? We all comfortable with?
I think on number 3, there's a typo. Should it be elementary schools?
Number 3,
Yes.
to house grades?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Or does anybody want to keep it as? Let's just keep it grammatically incorrect.
I would like to also, this is something I requested a while ago of Dr. Rockwood, and I believe we did that in the past, that this document be permanently amended to have the latest date that it was approved by the board for public viewing. So when they view the points, they can see the last time it was actually discussed and modified, and/or reapproved without modification. I think that would be very helpful. Because right now, I think, that,
It's supposed to say 2021.
yeah, I believe it does, at the bottom, if I'm not mistaken. This copy does not have it, but I believe that was one of the things that the previous administration did do on our online version of it, which is helpful. Or maybe they eliminated the 2003 at the top, because it's very confusing when you think about it. Here we are in 2022, and we're talking about these, wait a minute, we haven't talked about this since 2003?
We'll revise this entire document and make sure it reflects that.
We need just to make sure we have transparency of when we do discuss it, that it is documented.
Yes. For anybody who comes and looks at it for the first time and goes, oh, well, they just did this 6 months ago. Or,
How about number 5? Any discussion on number 5? Just making sure we cover all the numbers. Number 6?
I don't even know what that means.
What does that mean?
it means try not to rezone
Yes.
Randall or Terry or any school more than you have to. That's how I understand it.
Yeah, because parents buy their homes to go to specific high schools, and then we come along a year later and rezone them and don't give them any warning. It's not friendly.
Well, I get that, but
I mean, it's not saying we won't, it just says we'll pay attention to it.
And number 7, update the wording.
Right. Number 7, we'll bring that back to the board. I mean, not 7.
Number 4.
4 and 7, yes.
Okay, so then if we are, don't want to, do we want to wait until we can get final wording? Unless somebody wants to make a motion to,
Can we make a motion to revise the master plan numbers and not the whole thing, or do you want to do the whole thing once we have it revised?
is there a reason that we need to do the numbers this evening?
No, ma'am.
It will affect any
So we could-
contracts or any kind of, so time-wise, we're okay to wait till February to?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I guess I'll still ask if there's a motion, and then if not, then,
The motion can be the table to February.
okay. Do I have a motion to table the revision, the approval of the revised master plan principles until next month, till February? Mr. Welk makes a motion, Ms. Danziger
second it.
seconds.
Discussion real quick.
Yes.
Why next month?
Oh, I guess we could do it on Tuesday.
I was gonna say, can we do it next week?
Joe, Mr.
Well-
Hubenite, good job, good job.
But I was wondering, is that enough time to do it by next Tuesday?
I think she's already done, but
She's probably already finished with
she's
it.
like, give me 5 more minutes. Okay, Tuesday, okay, so, sorry, can we? Okay, so,
Revise your
Amend the
motion.
Amend the motion.
would you like to amend the motion?
No, I would not, because I think that's rushing it. I think it's a little bit hasty based on these numbers. I think we've had some discussion tonight that I would like to hear some answers to, particularly the 6th grade versus, under a school within a school, building out some of these other wings in the high school. I would really like to have community input on some of this stuff. I'd really like to have lots of parents and different stakeholders, business owners come and speak to this. I'm not comfortable adjusting these numbers right now, or even Tuesday night. So,
But you made a motion to,
table it.
I said for
Until-
approval in February, I believe, so that's not your motion. For the approval of the revised, okay.
I'm gonna stick with my motion. I wanna vote on it.
Okay, would you please repeat the motion?
We were gonna table any decision on this until February, at least.
Okay, and you second that?
Yes, I guess I did.
Okay, so till February.
Although I would like to do
And
it sooner.
it can pass or not pass right now, and then we can make a new motion if somebody wants to. but-
Okay, any further discussion on that? Okay, all in favor to table this for approval until the February meeting, raise your hand, say aye. Okay, none opposed, motion carries. Okay. So next,
All right, moving on our agenda, we have to do a little housekeeping and move a few things around to get,
So while we're doing that, we have POPSA here board, and so the conversation next is gonna be talking about Phelan Elementary School attendance boundaries. And so, again, same principles, is that we just, really look at it, have a deep conversation, ask as many questions as you like, and, we'll be here to make sure we answer all your questions. And so, once we're ready, Chris, you can let us know once we're ready, and we'll start moving. Well, we have,
do a mic check. Do a mic check.
Check. Is that loud enough?